Once a betrayer, always a betrayer, said the mother, tapping her heels on the pavement as she walked. She squeezed little Martha's hand and walked too fast, with her daughter struggling to keep up. Martha didn't understand why her mother was angry with her dad. She loved him very much herself. The girl was sure that her mother loved him too and would forgive him. Many years passed, and little Martha became Mrs. Dodson, and life took its course. Now it was she who, holding her daughter's hand, hurried to burn bridges. The phrase spoken by her mother many years ago pulsed in her temples. Once a betrayer, always a betrayer. "Mommy, it hurts," her daughter cried. Martha stopped and let go of her hand, looking at her own palm. She remembered the pain she had once experienced herself when she was just a little younger than Lucy. "Sorry, I'll go slower. I'll take you to Grandma's now, and we'll see from there," said Martha. "But I don't want to go to Grandma's. I want to be with you," Lucy stubbornly insisted. "I need to go run some errands, and then I'll come get you, and we'll go for a walk. When are we going home?" This question caught Martha off guard. Her daughter waited for an answer, looking at her with her father's light brown eyes. "I don't know," Martha honestly admitted. "What about Dad? He'll miss us. I'll call him to come pick me up at Grandma's." "Don't you dare do that," Martha blurted out. Lucy's lips trembled, as they always did when someone raised their voice at her. "But Dad promised to take me horseback riding." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I'll buy you a horse. I'll buy you one." "Really, Dad only promised to take me for a ride. You're the best." Lucy's tears quickly dried up, and she hugged her mother, beaming with happiness. "Where will the horse sleep?" Martha felt ashamed. She had gotten into the habit of buying off her daughter with gifts, unlike Derek, who took Lucy to the zoo or to see puppet shows. "I thought you were talking about a toy horse. You know, they sell these happy puppies now. They come in different colors," Martha said. "No, Lucy's lips curled in a pout. "I don't want that silly pony. It doesn't look anything like a real horse. It's stupid." "Lucy," Martha scolded her sternly, "stop your tantrum right now, or I'll have to punish you." "I want to go to Daddy," Lucy wailed, whining like a puppy. Finally, they arrived at their destination. Grandma opened the door, as always with rollers in her hair. Mrs. Thompson was delighted to see her daughter and granddaughter and hurried to the kitchen to prepare tea. "Mom, can Lucy stay with you for a bit? I have to be in 2 places at once today," Martha said, helping Lucy out of her coat. Grandmother came out of the kitchen and looked at her daughter with surprise. "What? You didn't warn me. You could have called. I would have gone to the store." "Mom, I'm sorry. Everything happened so quickly. I didn't have time." "Well, go to the store with Lucy." "No, I can't, you know that. Lucy will want to go to the playground, and I get nervous with all those spider webs. The child will fall, and it'll be my fault." "Mom." "Well, go to the store alone. Lucy will stay home. She's a smart girl." Martha tried to remain calm, though everything inside her was boiling. "No, Martha, I can't leave Lucy alone. She's still too young." "What did Derek do? Is that why you came without calling?" Martha hung her head. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Okay, Mom, I don't have time right now. I'll come back and tell you everything." "Don't worry, we're only here for a short time. I'll think of something. Bye." She kissed Lucy and ran out the door, down the stairs. The mother closed the door and whispered quietly to herself, "I was right." When Martha and Derek first got married, Mrs. Thompson would constantly pester them about when she would see grandchildren. She promised to provide support without any problems. However, when Martha gave birth to a daughter, Mrs. Thompson quickly forgot her promises. She would occasionally come over and take the baby for a walk for an hour or 2. When the girl got older, Mrs. Thompson declared firmly that she would no longer go for walks. The playground was full of nasty kids, scary slides, and all sorts of dangers, and her blood pressure was high. Martha was forced to take a long-term leave, burying her career ambitions. It was all the more painful for her now that she had found out that Derek had cheated on her with a colleague at work. They worked at the same company, and Martha knew this colleague. She was now occupying the position that Martha had given up for the sake of her family. Now, of course, she would never go back there. It was better to start everything from scratch than to hear pitying sighs behind her back and see her ex-husband and his lover every day. Now standing in front of the courthouse doors, Martha was hesitant to file for divorce. Derek was a good father and Lucy loved him. What if he wanted to take her daughter away through the court? She had nothing, no steady job, nothing. And there was no one to look after Lucy, and there was no nursery in sight. But remembering her husband's pitiful attempts to justify himself, she submitted the completed application. The next item on the list was the job center. Martha filled out the form and joined the long queue. Meanwhile, Grandma and her granddaughter sat down to have tea. Lucy didn't particularly enjoy being at her grandma's, but fortunately, it didn't happen often. "So, how are you living there?" Grandma asked. "Good," the girl said. "I've got some candies for you." Grandma winked conspiratorially. "Just don't tell your mother, or she'll scold me." "She won't. She's sad. I ate all the candies at home, and she didn't even notice." "What are you talking about? All the candies? Why is Mom sad? Did she have a fight with Dad?" Mrs. Thompson had long known that men couldn't be trusted. And there it was. "We had a fight," the girl sighed. "I asked her to make up with Dad, but she gets angry. You see, my dear, sometimes you can't forgive a person. Or rather, not everything should be forgiven," Mrs. Thompson said reservedly, placing a vase of mint powder in front of the girl. "Grandma, don't you have any other candies? I don't like these dragies." "Dragies, sorry, there are no others." "But I told you I like teddy bears or squirrels," said the girl. "And I like mint powder," Grandma said affectionately, taking one from the vase and putting it in her mouth. "Well, if you don't want it, as you wish, let's go. I'll turn on a cartoon for you." She turned on the cassette for Lucy to watch. The girl watched The Wizard of Emerald City. It was the only cartoon at her grandmother's house, and she always watched it. She knew every word and every frame by heart, so she closed her eyes. After some time, the grandmother peeked into the room. Seeing that her granddaughter had fallen asleep, she turned off the TV and tiptoed out of the room. Her friend, Grace Bradshaw, called her, and they began their usual discussion about the dishonesty of online stores that advertise one price but charge another at the register. They then talked about the illness of a mutual acquaintance and the insolent hairdresser who schedules young girls for chemical treatments and styling on special pensioner days to avoid giving discounts to senior citizens. When all the topics had been exhausted, Mrs. Thompson brought up her main trump card. "My Martha, she had a fight with her husband. Yes, they're all goats, you can't deny it. Every one of them is a cursed dog. How's Martha? Well, she seems to be holding up. Lucy brought over today. Who knows, Grace? Maybe she'll file for divorce." Lucy, who had gone to the kitchen to get a drink of water, heard the last sentence and ran back to her room, hiding under the covers. She felt like her warm and cozy world, the one she often imagined with her mom, dad, herself, and her little brother who wasn't born yet, holding hands under the sun with green grass beneath their feet, had collapsed. The door opened. "Mom, why is the door open?" Martha asked, returning from the stock exchange. "Open? I don't know. Maybe I forgot to close it after you." "Oh, aging is not fun," Mrs. Thompson sighed. "And where's Lucy? I brought her a present." Martha took off her shoes and went to wash her hands. She lay down and then fell asleep. "I didn't want to wake her. Let her rest," Mrs. Thompson said. "Mom, come on, I asked you." "She'll sleep now, and then you won't be able to put her to bed at night," Martha replied, wiping her hands. "A mother is always wrong," Mrs. Thompson grumbled and went to her room. "Mom," she heard her daughter's cry and rushed to her. "Why are you yelling like that? You almost gave me a heart attack," she muttered. What is it? Where's Lucy? Martha turned her pale face towards her mother. She must be in the bathroom. Lucy, called Mrs. Thompson and went towards the toilet, but the girl wasn't there. Her boots and jacket were gone too. The girl had run away. I assure you, she was watching cartoons, and then she fell asleep, Mrs. Thompson whispered through tears. I don't understand how she could slip away. Maybe you shouted at her or something. Martha's voice sounded strange to Mrs. Thompson. No, we were sitting together drinking tea. I didn't have her favorite candy. Mrs. Thompson blew her nose into a handkerchief. It was painful to watch the grandmother, and Martha seemed to have turned to stone. Both of them got into the elevator and, stopping on the right floor, walked up to the door. Maybe Lucy's already there, Martha said hopefully, and prepared to ring the doorbell, but then she lowered her hand. What's wrong? Ring it, Mrs. Thompson whispered. I can't. If Lucy isn't with him, he'll kill me, and when we find her, he might take away my parental rights. Martha whispered. Let me wait for you on the floor below. You ring the bell and say you were passing by, and if Lucy's there, then it doesn't matter. The important thing is that we find her. Mrs. Thompson wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, took a deep breath, and pressed the doorbell. Derek answered almost immediately, and upon seeing his mother-in-law, he was more surprised than pleased. Hello, Mrs. Thompson. Please come in, he said. No, thank you. I just wanted to ask, are you alone, Derek? Did you come to check if I'm alone? Yes, please come in and see for yourself, he said with a smile. Don't be facetious, Derek. Mrs. Thompson forgot her daughter's request and asked directly, is Lucy home? No, isn't she with you? Martha grabbed the child and ran off today without warning. She's not answering her phone. Martha bit her finger on the lower floor so her husband wouldn't hear her sobbing. I have to go. Mrs. Thompson turned to leave, but Derek stopped her. Wait, Mrs. Thompson. If you don't know where Lucy is, then tell me, where is my wife? Here, Martha sobbed. I'm here. Footsteps were heard and she appeared herself. She told Derek how she discovered her daughter was missing, what the girl was wearing, and he ran to the command post. Martha stayed in the apartment in case Lucy was brought back there. Mrs. Thompson was sent home in case the girl returned there. Lucy's description was given to all crews on duty in the city. Rosalind Coleman, a school coach for Sambo, always walked home from work. But today she suddenly decided to take the bus. It arrived just as a cold rain began to pour outside. A couple of days ago, Rosalind overheard parents of her students discussing a news about a pedophile operating in the area. A child was recently rescued from him. The suspect was described as taller than average, around 30 years old. No other distinguishing features were recalled, but the child noted the perpetrator's pallidness and that he identified himself as a police officer. Rosalind remembered this because she was witnessing a similar scene right now. A little girl was standing by the bus door, and a man around 30 was talking to her with a smile. Rosalind moved closer to the exit, even though she needed to get off at the next stop. I'm not someone to be afraid of. I'll walk you home. She heard the villain's sugary speech. The bus doors opened. The girl said something to the stranger, and just as he was about to follow her, she jumped out of the bus and ran away. The criminal chased after her. The doors closed in front of Rosalind, and she pounded on them. The driver, assessing the situation, opened them. A stranger, a few meters away from the bus stop, was showing some sort of identification to a little girl, most likely a fake one. Rosalind approached them. What's the problem? Is he bothering you, girl? She asked. Miss, I'm a police officer. Here's my ID. He unfolded the card to Rosalind, but couldn't figure out how it got on the ground, and there was an 80-kilogram of dead weight sitting on it. Run, girl, I'll detain him, shouted Rosalind. Any mother with a child will help you and take you to the police. Are you crazy? I'm really a police officer. Let me go. Gasping for air, the criminal tried to break free from Rosalind's grip, but her legs were like iron. "I am Josephine Bogarn," she announced pompously. "Nice to meet you," the maniac whispered. "Let go, Josephine, it hurts." A patrol car happened to be passing by, and the police officers were drawn to the strange scene, a man on the ground and a woman sitting on top of him. The officers got out of the car and, quietly talking to each other, approached the strange pair from both sides. "Very timely," exclaimed the woman. "Get the handcuffs, gentlemen. Before you lies the very criminal who injured the boy. Don't you move. She need the body beneath her." "Eric Gilson, isn't it?" remarked one of the cops. "Exactly, Eric. Ha ha ha. No, wait, madam. Don't get up. Let us enjoy the sight." Rosalind felt ashamed and quickly stood up. She realized that the man she had taken down was actually a policeman. But just because he was a policeman didn't mean he wasn't a maniac. "By the way, miss, you're under arrest. Assault on a police officer. Article 318, 5 to 10, his partner started, with no trace of a smile. "Oh, come on." The criminal shook himself off. "This girl deserves a reward, and you want to charge her? Let's go. We need to catch up with the girl. She's lost and frightened. God forbid something happens." Before getting into the car, he approached Rosalind and, blushing, held his hand to his forehead. "Your documents, Miss Bogarna." "I only have this." Rosalind handed him her pass. "I don't carry my passport." Rosalind Coleman, physical education teacher. He seemed inexplicably delighted. "I'd like to continue our acquaintance if you don't mind. How do you me? Class." "Class?" Rosalind mimicked, watching the car that took away her future husband, Captain Eric Gilson, into the chilly darkness of the city. "There she is. Slow down." Eric pointed to a small shadow darting into an alley. He jumped out and quickly followed her. Seeing her pursuer, the girl ducked into one of the 3 entrances. It was a through passage, and she knew it because the opposite door opened, and an old man with a dog entered. Lucy hid. The huge black dog sniffed her and licked her. "Whose girl are you?" asked the grandfather, whose eyes gleamed with an unpleasant shine. Lucy shrank, scared of the scary old man and his dog. "I'm my mom and dad's," she said softly. "Come with me, I'll give you a puppy," the old man said affectionately, stroking his dog. "I have all kinds of puppies, black and white." The girl wanted to slip past, but the dog suddenly snarled, and the old man grabbed Lucy by the sleeve with an iron grip. The entrance door slammed. "Lucy, are you here?" a male voice shouted. "Yes, I'm here," the girl replied. The old man and his dog immediately disappeared. Eric appeared, out of breath. "Lucy, you see, I know your name and even your last name. Your mom and dad are looking for you. They're beside themselves. Let's go." He took the girl's hand and led her to the police car. The parents were overjoyed. Martha was so happy she forgot about the divorce altogether. She came to visit Mrs. Thompson 2 days later. It was her birthday, but she had been refusing to celebrate it for many years. Nevertheless, Martha brought flowers and a cake. "All right," smiled the birthday girl as she pulled out a bottle of champagne. "If we're going to celebrate, we might as well celebrate." They sat together and reminisced about old times. But the conversation couldn't help but touch on a painful topic for Martha. "I'm sorry, of course," said Mrs. Thompson, "but if you have proof of his infidelity and you forgive him, I won't understand you. He'll just keep walking all over you." "What are you talking about, Mom? What evidence? I was not a witness. I just got a phone call telling me that my husband was cheating on me, and I put the facts together. That day we had a corporate party at work for the company's birthday. Derek invited me to go, but I couldn't because I had no one to leave Lucy with. Remember, I asked you, but you were sick then." Mrs. Thompson lowered her gaze. She remembered that she just didn't want to spend the night in someone else's apartment. She slept better at home, and she lied. "Do you think that if you had gone, everything would have turned out differently?" "Dear, you can't be that knave. There will always be swine." Mom, I'm asking you, don't call my husband that. I really do think that if I had gone, things would have been different. Tell me, how did you find out? Mrs. Thompson asked, involuntarily remembering how she caught Martha's father in the car with some hanger-on. Derek came back from the party drunk and all soaked. I asked him why he was so wet. He replied that he had escorted a colleague home. I asked why her husband didn't meet her and why he was the one to escort her home. He didn't explain anything, and I felt that something had happened between them. Did you ask him directly? Of course, multiple times, Martha replied. And what did he say? Martha shook her head sadly. He denies everything, but it's just a feeling I have. I sense that something is off. I don't know how to explain it to you. Martha took a sip of champagne. I feel like it's a lie. You don't have to explain anything to me. I know what you mean. I've been through something similar myself. You know that. Mrs. Thompson propped her head up with her hand. Ultimately, it's up to you to decide what to do. Joseph Charleston sat in his bathrobe in front of the television, watching another gritty movie. His feet, up to his ankles, were soaking in hot water. The old man loved foot baths and considered them a panacea over all medicines. He only called the doctor to come over to his house to see if she was as young and pretty as the last one, hoping to accidentally expose himself by opening his robe, which he wore nothing underneath. The huge black dog growled deeply, and after a while, the doorbell rang. I'm coming, I'm coming. The old man slipped his skinny feet into Turkish shoes with turned-up toes and glided on the smooth linoleum to answer the door as if he were skiing. But instead of a young doctor, 2 young men stood at the door. Who are you looking for? The old man whispered, scolding himself for not looking through the peephole. We came to see some puppies, Grandpa, one of the visitors said, batting their white eyelashes. They say you give away both white and black ones. Another guy silently showed him his ID and pushed the old man aside, entering the apartment first. The dog, sensing the fear of its owner, lay under the table and growled. They had a preventive conversation with the lover of little girls and young doctors, but there was nothing to accuse him of, so they had to limit themselves to just that. Lillian Martin was returning home by her usual route, through the garages. It was much closer than going around. She was happy about the snow that had fallen. Everything seemed brighter and happier. She thought about the upcoming new year and how she could ask Santa Claus for a new phone. Suddenly, a dark figure appeared in front of her, indicating nothing good. Lillian's parents had warned her many times, never go anywhere with strangers, an adult will never ask a child for help, and gave other useful advice on how to behave with a maniac. But all these tips were useless now. This person in front of her didn't ask for anything, he just approached her, scary and inevitable. The girl stepped back and then ran, reaching for the whistle hanging on her neck. The cold twilight was pierced by a loud whistle. The figure disappeared into the shadows of the garages once again, and Lillian took a detour, constantly looking back. Paul was walking towards Lillian, who had also decided to take a shortcut through the garages. Don't go there, Paul. There's some scary man there. Lillian blurted out. Paul was 12 years old, and he thought it was shameful to be afraid. What if Lillian had made it up just to tell everyone at school what a coward he was? No, he would go and show everyone that he wasn't afraid of anyone. I don't care about him, Paul spat and went ahead, while Lillian ran home. On the way, she met her mom's friend and told her everything. The woman called the police. Rosalind Coleman brought the bouquet of chrysanthemums to her face and breathed in their scent. Why, Eric, why? She lowered her eyelashes. Her cheeks turned pink from pleasure and the light wine that Eric ordered for dinner, inviting Rosalind to the restaurant. A beautiful woman must be given flowers, said the captain as he paid the florist. Well, here's to your beauty, Rosalind, to your feminine strength, so to speak. We've already had 3 toasts for me, Rosalind said. Maybe we should toast to you now. You know, Rosalind, I have good news, Eric said. The guy you mistook me for has been arrested and is giving a statement. Wow, how did you manage to catch him? Rosalind asked. A woman went to the duty station and reported an attack on a child. We went out and found him dragging the kid, but it turned out that the boy had put up quite a fight with the criminal and wore him out. When did this happen? Rosalind asked. A few hours ago. Eric touched Rosalind's hand. What's the boy's name? Rosalind was so interested that she didn't withdraw her hand. Paul, I think. Yeah, I remember now. Paul Bradbury. That's my Paul, my student. Rosalind screamed out loud in the whole restaurant. Where is he now? Is he okay? Eric, take me to him. I want to shake his hand. He's a real hero. Well, it's probably too late now. They've already taken the boy home, and he's probably sleeping. Yes, you're right, Rosalind agreed. I'll shake his hand tomorrow. Martha quietly opened the door with her key. Derek and Lucy were already asleep. They weren't expecting her because she had said she was staying at her mother's place. She had originally planned to stay there, but changed her mind. She couldn't keep running away from the unpleasant conversation. Now she wanted to clear the air, but to her great regret, Derek was asleep. She tiptoed into the room and settled into the chair without turning on the light. As Martha tried to make sense of what her mother had said, she looked at her sleeping husband and tried to imagine how he could walk all over her. She couldn't imagine it, but she could clearly see herself in a few years. She pictured herself sitting there, wearing hair rollers, with a plate of peppermint dragee in front of her, and her only joy would be discussing sales at a chain store with her friend. Lucy would understand and forgive her, of course, but she would grow up just as vulnerable as she was. She would bring her grandchild to visit Martha on weekends. What would Martha's life have been like if her mother hadn't kicked her father out? She remembered how she invited children from intact families, those who had fathers. She suddenly wanted to know and hear her own father's version of why things had turned out the way they did. Why did he, who had loved Martha so much, only visit a few times and send her birthday money? Martha tried to remember her dad, but couldn't. Or rather, she remembered his blue shirt with a fashionable 70s collar, and that he had thick hair, but she couldn't recall his face at all. Martha went to the kitchen and turned on the laptop. It was Derek's laptop. It had a password, but she knew it, having sneaked a peek before. She tried entering her father's information into the search bar. First name, last name, date of birth, and place of birth. There were many people with that information, so she decided to explore each link. "You're back," she heard a hoarse voice from behind. Turning around, she saw her husband. His face was pale, his eyes gleaming. "Why didn't you tell me? I would have come to pick you up." I changed my mind and didn't want to bother you." "What are you doing on my laptop?" he asked. "You know, I suddenly felt the urge to find my father. I want to ask him something important to me." "Find your father?" She thought Derek's cheek twitched. "Only old information is available on the internet. Maybe we should contact an address bureau. I don't know what to do now." "And I don't know either. Maybe he's not even alive," she said thoughtfully. "How do you know the password?" he suddenly asked, and all her hopes that he wasn't hiding anything from her vanished into thin air. "I know a lot of things, Derek," she teased, enjoying the confusion that overtook him. "It seems like my mom's champagne is starting to work now," she thought to herself. "It's now or never." "Martha, I don't like this. You can't know anything because there was nothing." Derek tried very hard to keep his voice from shaking. The most unpleasant thing in this situation is not the possibility of infidelity, Derek. Martha looked meaningfully at her husband, but the fact that you continue to lie to me. "I'm not lying. I didn't tell you. Well, I filed for divorce, not because you cheated on me, but because you still don't have the courage to admit it. How can I live with someone who lies to my face?" Derek stood there, bowing his head, then approached and sat on a stool next to Martha. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm really a jerk." I lied to you out of fear that if you found out the truth, you'd leave me right away. Martha couldn't believe her ears. She had almost believed Derek wanted to withdraw her application from the court and make an appointment with a psychologist about her suspicions. But it turns out he really did cheat on her. She felt like a fish thrown onto the shore. She wanted to take a breath, but it was only a half breath, wanted to cry, slap the cheater, but there were no tears or strength. How long ago? She looked at him, but couldn't catch his gaze, since that same corporate party, right? He nodded. I broke up with her right away when I realized I could lose you. Well, you're a jerk, Derek. Martha, you said you needed the truth, that you couldn't live in a lie, and I confessed to you. Please forgive me. He approached to hug her, but she suddenly screamed. Get your disgusting hands off me. Don't scream. You'll wake up Lucy. He closed his laptop and went to the other room. She sat there for a while, then he came back and said, Go lie down. I'm not sharing a bed with you, she hissed at him. Never. And you don't have to. I'll leave and we'll talk tomorrow, okay? It was only then that she realized he was already dressed. What do we need to talk about? Where are you going? I'll think of something. I can't let you sit here all night like this, on a stool. He took his bag with his laptop and left, closing the door carefully behind him. And only after that, Martha let herself go. She locked herself in the bathroom, turned on the water, and burst into tears. If Derek betrayed her, then her mother was right. You can't trust anyone, and she wouldn't try to find her father. He betrayed her mother at first, and then Martha, his own daughter who loved him so much. Surprisingly, Martha fell asleep quickly. Mommy, wake up. Lucy shook her by the shoulder. What time is it? Martha jumped up. Did I oversleep for the interview? It's Sunday today, the girl said. Daddy promised yesterday that we would go to the zoo together to see the polar bear. And where's Daddy? He'll come, Martha said, getting up. But I'm not sure about the zoo. But Daddy promised, Lucy pouted. Okay, we'll see. Now wash up and come to the table. We'll have breakfast. But Daddy, and then Martha snapped. For a moment, she forgot that she couldn't shout at Lucy. What's with you and Papa? Papa all the time. Enough, she yelled right in her daughter's face. There was a pause. It was what Martha had feared the most. Her daughter was frozen, as if she was paralyzed. Tears trembled on her eyelashes, but she looked past her mother, as if she could see through walls. Baby, darling, Lucy. Martha hugged her. I didn't mean it. Forgive me. But the girl didn't seem to hear her. For almost half an hour, the mother tried to reach her. She cried, pleaded, and offered to go to the zoo where the white bear was waiting for them. All in vain, the girl didn't respond. The doorbell rang. It was Derek. Seeing his daughter, he also started talking to her. And although it took a while, she finally heard his voice. Daddy. She smiled at him. Finally. Mom says we're having breakfast at home, but you promised to take us to the cafe. Parents exchanged a glance. Martha shook her head. Lucy, go get dressed and play for a bit. Your mom and I need to talk, and then we'll go out for breakfast. To a cafe? Of course. The little girl ran off to her room, as if nothing had happened, as if there had been no outburst. You yelled at her? Derek asked softly. You know. I know. Yes, I lost my temper, and I deeply regret it. Martha couldn't bear to listen to the reproaches directed at her. Will you come to the zoo with us? He looked at her with the same light brown eyes that their daughter had, pleading and hopeful. I don't want to. Martha turned away. I have plans of my own. What plans? Today is Sunday. We should relax and spend time with the family. With the family? Come on. And where is the family? Derek sighed. Martha, finally he said, do you really want a divorce? Asked the husband. You're the one who destroyed everything. I just want to give legal status to this collapse. Why do you need a divorce? You know that at least 3 people will be unhappy. Who is that, I wonder? Me, Lucy, and you. You should have thought about us with Lucy before. Martha sarcastically remarked, when you were with that bitch, she's got nowhere to put her labels. You say I ruined everything? He asked again. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Wait, I'll be right back. He rushed out of the apartment and returned 20 minutes later with a bouquet of red roses in his hands. Well, let's start over, he said, handing her the bouquet and getting down on one knee in front of her. Be my wife, beautiful Martha. If you refuse me, you will make me unhappy forever. Martha covered her face with her hands. Leave, Derek. Don't bother, she said. I understand you need time. Derek left, but please think about it carefully. All I ask is for a chance to prove that I want and can make you happy. I don't need anyone else but you and Lucy. Derek and his daughter went to the zoo, while Martha went online to search for an answer to a difficult question. Is it possible to forgive infidelity? Opinions were conflicting. She felt sorry for Lucy, but did anyone feel sorry for Martha? And yet, Lucy grew up to be a normal person. Martha grabbed a bouquet of roses and wanted to dramatically throw them away, but the bouquet was too big, it wouldn't fit in the bin, and it would definitely clog the garbage chute. By evening, Derek left again. Lucy didn't want to let him go until the very end. When she fell asleep, Martha took out a suitcase and threw Derek's things in there. She placed the suitcase by the door. When Lucy woke up, she stumbled upon it. Mom, are we leaving? Lucy asked. No, honey, it's just that Dad is going away on a business trip, Martha said. It has to be this way. Mama, I know Dad hurt you, but he probably wanted what was best. The little girl hugged her mother. Please forgive him. They decided to celebrate Christmas at home, as is customary. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Derek opened the door and joyfully proclaimed, Beloved mother-in-law has finally arrived. Look at her without curlers. Don't be ridiculous, Derek. I brought my signature salad and jellied meat. Put everything in the refrigerator, commanded Mrs. Thompson. Mom, what took you so long? Martha asked. I got distracted. They're showing such good movies on TV today. Mrs. Thompson took off her coat and, nodding towards the kitchen, whispered, Has he started drinking already? Isn't it too early? No, Mom, don't be ridiculous. Martha was offended on behalf of her husband. We haven't even sat down yet. He's just in a good mood. And where is my beautiful snow maiden? Mrs. Thompson asked, looking for her granddaughter. She asked to be woken up an hour before midnight. Derek replied upon returning. Well, then let's go. What are we waiting for? Mrs. Thompson walked into the room and sat down at the table. Why are there 5 place settings? She wondered. Well, you never know. Maybe a neighbor will come by, or even an unknown relative will drop in for a visit. Christmas Eve is such a holiday. You can't celebrate it alone. What would you like, Mrs. Thompson? Asked her son-in-law. They drank wine and snacked on appetizers. The wine had a positive effect on Mrs. Thompson. She blushed and even laughed at the jokes her son-in-law told. Sometime around midnight, when it was time to wake Lucy up, the doorbell rang. At the door stood Santa Claus with a big bag. We need to wake up Lucy quickly. Martha went to wake her daughter, while Santa Claus opened his bag. I bet he's collecting candies and tangerines for orphans, and then he'll sell it all himself, Mrs. Thompson whispered loudly to her son-in-law. But luckily, Santa Claus didn't hear her. He pulled out 2 bottles of champagne and a bucket of caviar from his bag. Wow, said Derek. You really know how to make an entrance, Grandpa. Come on in and take a seat. Santa Claus, yay! Lucy exclaimed in delight, running out to the hallway in her t-shirt and tights. Lucy, Martha scolded her. You have a pretty dress to wear. Go put it on and come back to us. Don't go anywhere, the little girl shouted to Santa as she ran off to change. Everyone gathered around the table, and the 5th plate was placed in front of Santa. Derek poured champagne, and Santa had to take off his beard to eat and drink. Don't you need to go on and continue to visit the children? Mrs. Thompson scrutinized the unfamiliar stranger. "Well, that's what I'm doing, Rosemary," he replied, putting his hat and beard into the pocket of his snowflake-covered coat. Looking at him, Mrs. Thompson recoiled and clutched her heart. "Oh, it's your father, Martha? No, you, Ryan, better put the hat and beard back on. You look better in it." "You haven't changed a bit, you old ulcer," Santa remarked. "No, Martha, what's this?" whispered Mrs. Thompson loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Is he seriously going to celebrate Christmas with us?" "Of course," suddenly spoke up Lucy. "Awesome, we have our own Santa Claus." They clinked champagne glasses. Then, as the bells chimed, each made a wish as tradition dictates. Lucy and her parents went to watch the fireworks, while Mrs. Thompson stayed alone with Santa Claus. The champagne had made her kinder, and she was ready to admit her mistake about the hat and beard. "So, how has your life turned out, Ryan? Are you happy?" Rosemary asked her ex-husband. It turned out as it did. Ryan took off his sparkly embroidered robe. "I was married twice, one time unsuccessfully, the second time, well, and you? You're happy yourself, Rosemary. Don't regret anything." "What to regret? And you're good too. Your wife probably celebrates Christmas alone, and you're entertaining me with your stories here." "Go home, Ryan." "I'm not married anymore," Ryan smiled. "I buried my wife last year, so nobody's waiting for me except for my dog Jack." "I'm sorry, I didn't know about your loss." Mrs. Thompson lowered the volume of the TV, which was showing the Christmas of Light. "It's okay, time heals." Ryan filled their glasses with champagne again. "And yet, Rosemary, you didn't answer. Don't you regret anything?" Mrs. Thompson fell silent, lost in thought. "I don't know. But do you remember how we used to sing together?" "Ah, now there's nothing left to remember," she said. "But we could come together, couldn't we, Rosemary? Hold on to each other. It's not good to be alone." "Oh no," Rosemary exclaimed, recoiling from Ryan. "I'm not alone. I live wonderfully. I have everything I need, sometimes even in excess." "But Rosemary, think about it. I have a summer house in Shachara, a motorcycle. I could take you for a ride." "Oh no, you old man, you've gone completely mad." Rosemary laughed. "I turned you down when you were young and handsome. And now you're old, bald, probably with a bad prostate. No, Ryan, you won't seduce me with a motorcycle." "I didn't even think about seducing you." Ryan was offended. "Have you seen yourself in the mirror? An old hag." "You old goat." Rosemary squealed and slapped her ex-husband. Lucy and her parents returned from the New Year's Eve party, but found neither Granny nor Santa Claus at home. "Oh my God, what a mess. Did he kill Mom?" Martha whispered to her husband Derek. "No, it's all right. They won't go anywhere. They'll be found," Derek reassured her, but Martha was still worried. Who knows what might have happened to her father during all those years they hadn't seen him. She found him just a week ago, and his loneliness had shaken her so much that she couldn't help but invite him for the Christmas celebration. Towards morning, the phone rang. Martha picked up the receiver. "Hello, Mom." "Come and take your Santa Claus. He's snoring so loud it's impossible to sleep," grumbled Mrs. Thompson. "Mom, please deal with it yourself, okay?" Martha smiled. "How?" "Put a bucket on his head. It's a great remedy for snoring, they say. Merry Christmas, Mommy. Love you." She hung up and smiled at her husband. "You're my happiness," Derek said, hugging her. "I love you. I promise you won't regret giving me a chance." 9 months later, Lucy got a little brother, whom she had dreamed of and drawn so long ago, now by her side with her mom and dad. And Mrs. Thompson still lives alone, telling everyone that she's fine, without any lost relatives of the past life.